Hello, beautiful people of the internet. How are you doing today? My name is Jackie and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today in this video, I am going to review all of the books I read in the month of January 2023. In the month of January, I read 6 books and I also quietly DNF'd another book. So I read a total of 2,015 pages and my average star rating was 4.08 out of 5. I will mention the book that I DNF'd first because I really don't have that much to say about it. I decided to DNF Shiver by Ali Reynolds. This is a mystery thriller set, I already forget if it's France or Switzerland, but it's set at this sort of ski resort town and it involves a group of friends who are reconnecting after many years, and a mutual friend of theirs seems to have died many years ago under mysterious circumstances. I DNF'd this after several chapters because I just think the way it was written was not really working for me. The characters felt just a little surface level, and while it wasn't an awful book, I just knew it wasn't going to be a favorite of mine or anything, so I decided to spend my time on books I thought I would enjoy more. So the first book that I read was actually my favorite book of the month. I read 1,000 Ships by Natalie Haynes, and I ended up giving this book 5 stars. I thoroughly enjoyed it. This was the last book I had to read for my 5-star predictions video, and it was the only book on that list that I actually gave 5 stars. So I will be coming out with another 5-star predictions in the near future. This is a retelling of the Trojan War from the perspective of the many women who were involved in the conflict, and it is so beautifully written. This book has many different perspectives. However, I felt like it really worked in my opinion. I definitely think it was ambitious to write from the points of view of so many characters, and it could have easily failed because a lot of times when you have that many points of view, it's hard for the reader to get invested. It can feel like a little bit too much. But in this book, I felt like all of the different women were very interesting and I enjoyed all of the perspectives that we got. I just really enjoyed the way that this was written, and I think it was what I had hoped it would be when I bought it. So I am definitely going to be reading this author's other books. She has a few books on her backlist that I will definitely be checking out. And also, I believe her new book, Stone Blind, either recently came out or is coming out soon, so I think I will have to check that book out as well. This really worked for me. I really enjoyed it. Then I read The Murder of Mr. Wickham by Claudia Gray. This was a 3-star for me. This is a murder mystery that takes place after the events of Jane Austen's novels, and basically it takes place in a universe where all the main couples from Jane Austen know each other. Emma and her husband, Mr. Knightley, are throwing a house party that a bunch of the other Jane Austen couples are invited to. At this party, the dastardly Mr. Wickham from Pride and Prejudice shows up uninvited, and when he's found murdered, there is no shortage of suspects because pretty much everybody at this house party had a reason to potentially want him dead. So Jonathan Darcy, the son of Elizabeth and Mr. Darcy, and Juliet Tilney, the daughter of Henry and Catherine Tilney, decide that they're going to team up to investigate and find out who murdered Mr. Wickham. I was really enjoying this book while I was reading it, so I still gave it 3 stars. However, I thought the ending was absolutely horrible. I think the solution to who killed Mr. Wickham really kind of came out of nowhere. I don't think it made a lot of sense because the motive, for lack of a better term, I do not think the author really foreshadowed that at all. And I just don't feel like she really played fair. I don't feel like the reader had enough information to guess who killed Mr. Wickham and why. I feel like she just did not foreshadow the ending. And it was kind of funny to me to see so many people who gave this book a positive review on Goodreads talk about, oh, I loved how many clues there were. In my opinion, there was not a single freaking clue to who killed Mr. Wickham. There were clues, However, all of them were just red herrings who ended up being related to another character's secret. Like, there was no clue in this book that led Jonathan and Juliet to the killer. In fact, Jonathan and Juliet basically did nothing to unmask the killer. The killer just confesses. They did nothing to unmask the killer. They were, you know, discovering all this information, but none of it led them to the correct villain. So really, it was just a poorly constructed mystery. So when I got to the end of this book, I really felt a lot of rage because I just feel like as a mystery, it was poorly done. Now, a lot of people disagree with me on that. There were a lot of people who loved this book and thought the mystery was great. I think if you're someone who reads a lot of mysteries, you will not like this. But if you're someone who is not a huge mystery reader, but you love Jane Austen, and you just want to read a murderous Jane Austen fanfiction, I think you'll love this book. Because up until the end, I was having a lot of fun with it. I really did like Jonathan and Juliet as the main characters. I liked both of them individually, and I liked seeing them team up to solve this crime. And there's a bit of potential romantic feelings developing between the two, which I thought was enjoyable to read. The other thing I really didn't like about this book is I felt like the way the author wrote some of Jane Austen's characters did not match with my perception of them. I think particularly the way she wrote Edmund and Fanny from Mansfield Park was really horrible. I think Fanny in this comes across as far too weak and judgmental. Fanny Price may not be as witty and outgoing as someone like Elizabeth Bennet, but she is a strong person, and I think the author did not give her enough credit in this book. And while I am not a huge Edmund Bertram fan by any means, he is not the complete asshole he is in this book. In this book, he is the most judgmental religious zealot, and I just hated his guts. I don't think the way she wrote Edmund and Fanny matches up with Edmund and Fanny from the original novel. I think if you just want to read a fun Jane Austen fan fiction, like, go ahead and read this book, but if you're someone who is a serious mystery lover and you like to be able to look back and see the clues that you missed and try to solve it, you're not going to be happy with this book. I will link my Goodreads review in the description where I explain my thoughts, and there are also some little spoiler sections that you can click on if you've read this book or just don't care about being spoiled. I also finally finished reading a book I've been working on for a few months, Murder of a Medici Princess by Caroline Murphy. I ended up giving this 4 stars. It did take me a while to read the entire thing because it is a nonfiction book, and nonfiction books do take me a little longer to get through, and with Cloak and Dagger Christmas in December, I did end up putting the book down for a little while. But overall, I did enjoy reading it. This is a historical nonfiction about the life and suspicious death of Isabella de' Medici, the daughter of the first Grand Duke of Tuscany. And I think this was a really interesting story. Reading this book, I was just thinking, God, I wish Netflix hadn't canceled the Medici TV show, because this would have made an amazing season. There would have been so much material for them to work with. There's murder, there's adultery, there's so much that just would have made for a great, like, soapy period drama season. It would have been great. Ugh, missed opportunity. I would have loved to see somebody make a show or a mini-series inspired by this story, because it would be so good. I would watch that for sure. I think this is definitely an interesting historical nonfiction to pick up, especially if you're already interested in the Medici family like I am. I have been very interested in them ever since I watched the aforementioned TV show. One thing I will say though is, though this book is called Murder of a Medici Princess, the murder really does not happen until very late in the book. Really, this book probably should have been titled, you know, The Life of Isabella de' Medici or something like that, because really it's more so the story of Isabella and her family. It's not 400 pages about her murder. I think the murder doesn't happen until, like, the penultimate chapter, so it's really a small portion of the story. Don't go into this book thinking the entire book is going to be about the murder, because that's not what happens. I did really think this book was interesting, and we met a lot of interesting people, and I think this book would just make such an amazing TV drama. The other thing, though, that I didn't like about it is at one point, Murphy kind of like implies that Isabella and one of her brothers might have been a little too close, if you catch my drift. And she kind of, you know, makes that suggestion, and I was like, girl, where are you going with this? Like, this is not like gonna be some Game of Thrones shit, is it? But she like kind of goes there, but then kind of retreats and says, oh, but there's no historical evidence that they were actually involved in an incestuous relationship. And I was like, girl, why'd you bring it up then? Like, very disturbing. Go see a counselor. Next, another really great read. I finally read Thunderhead, the second book in the Arc of a Scythe series by Neal Shusterman. I ended up giving this 4.5 stars. It was so good. This is another book that I would love to see be adapted into a film or TV show. I believe someone has bought the rights, so hopefully we'll see an adaptation of the Scythe series in the near future. I feel like this story just would be perfect for a screen adaptation. I think it has this sort of cinematic quality to it, and it would be so cool to see the characters and the settings on screen, see what actors and directors and costume designers could do with this world. I think that would be amazing. So this series takes place in a futuristic world where mankind has successfully eradicated death, so no one dies of injury or old age or disease anymore. However, obviously the planet can only support so many living people. So that's why scythes were created. And basically, scythes are these people who every year are responsible for gleaning, aka killing, a certain portion of the population. The two main characters, Rowan and Citra, are selected in the first book to train to become scythes. This is a young adult series, and I really don't like young adult much anymore. However, I do feel like even though this book is targeted at younger readers, it's never dumbed down in any way, and I feel like it does address a lot of complex questions pertaining to the meaning of life and morality. The thing that I don't like about these books is I feel like Neal Shusterman is not that good at writing romance. He kind of just like introduces a man, introduces a woman, and is like, yeah, the two of them, they're in love now, because I said so. And I'm always just like, okay, Neal, I feel like we could have built this up a little more, but whatever, buddy. In terms of the plot, though, these books are so good, they're so exciting, and they always end up going places I did not expect. I honestly think Scythe and Thunderhead are the best young adult books that I've read, probably since I first read The Hunger Games in middle school. I just think they're so interesting, and I have been really surprised multiple times while reading this book. I was going to give Thunderhead a 4-star, but then I got to the ending, and I was shook. Oh my god. Like, I just could not believe what happened. There was a thing that like hit me in the heart, and that's why I had to go up to a 4.5, because wow, Mr. Shusterman really stuck the landing. It was a great ending. I can't wait to finish out the trilogy. Then I read The Memoirs of Sherlock Holmes by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. This is a short story collection and the fourth in the Sherlock Holmes series. I ended up giving this 4 stars. I would say out of the 4 books, this is probably my second favorite. I thought it was really solid. However, I don't think the highs were as high as they were in The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes, the previous installment in the series. That short story collection had some short stories that I really loved, and this one, I didn't think any of the stories were bad, but there were also none that just were like 5 stars, amazing. I think it was all in all very, very solid though, and I do really enjoy the Sherlock Holmes short stories. I usually don't like mystery short stories, but I really do like these ones. The stories in this collection are Silver Blaze, The Yellow Face, The Stockbroker's Clerk, The Gloria Scott, The Musgrave Ritual, The Reigate Puzzle, The Crooked Man, The Resident Patient, The Greek Interpreter, The Naval Treaty, and The Final Problem. I think it is really interesting to see how the character of Sherlock Holmes develops over the course of these stories, because when I read the first book, A Study in Scarlet, I said, really, Sherlock Holmes is kind of insufferable when you think about it. He is extremely intelligent, but also very arrogant. And I do feel like over the series so far, his personality has been tempered a little bit, and I find him a little more likable as I keep reading. And I do think, though, he is not a very emotional person and not someone who is very social, you can tell that he does care about Watson. Another thing I found really interesting in this collection is one of the stories does deal with race. I don't want to spoil it. However, I thought it was really interesting because there were comments that from a 21st century perspective were definitely racist. However, I also at the same time feel like for a Victorian person, Conan Doyle is really presenting a pretty progressive viewpoint with that story, and it was really interesting to read. I feel like it must have caused some pushback at the time. I don't want to go into specifics because I don't want to spoil the story, but yeah, I just think it was really interesting to think about the way that's handled in that story. And finally, the last book that I read in January was Medusa by Jessie Burton. This was a gift from Tori from Good Strong Words. Thank you to her once again. I ended up giving this book 4 stars. I did like it, definitely did not like it as much as 1,000 Ships, but all in all, I thought it was pretty enjoyable. This is a feminist retelling of the myth of Medusa from Greek mythology. It's very clear that the author is using her story to comment on modern day rape culture, and really the Medusa myth just lends itself super well to feminist retellings. I mean, Natalie Haynes is now coming out with a Medusa retelling as well, and there are other books that reimagine her story. It really is a story that can be very relevant to women in modern times as well as ancient ones. This book follows Medusa, who is living a quiet life on her island in a self-induced exile after her punishment by the goddess Athena turned her hair into snakes. However, Medusa's life is forever changed when a young man named Perseus washes up on her island. I flew through this book. I think I read the entire thing in maybe 2 sittings. It was very easy to read, and I feel like this book would be great as an audiobook because the writing does have almost like a poetic quality. I feel like it would just really lend itself well to an audiobook. The words have this sort of flow to them at times. This edition is also illustrated, and I do think that enhanced my enjoyment. I really enjoyed looking at the illustrations that went along with this book, and all in all, I thought it was a really solid retelling of Medusa. I didn't realize that this book is technically young adult until I went on Goodreads to add it, and I saw it was listed under young adult. For some reason, I didn't know that it was meant for a younger audience. I will say, the one really big issue that I had with this book is some of the language that is used, and I think maybe Jessie Burton used this terminology because she was writing for teenage readers, but it really bothered me because a lot of times she uses words that clearly no one in ancient Greece was using, such as saying dad instead of father, or saying my girlfriend or my boyfriend. Like, nobody back then was calling someone their boyfriend. And like I said, now knowing that this was meant for young adults, I think maybe she was just trying to use the terminology that they themselves would use. However, it bothered me because it was so obviously anachronistic. So all in all, I thought this was a really solid book and I did enjoy it. Like I said, I flew through it. However, some of the terminology did really bug me. I feel like she could have used more period appropriate language that still would have been easy to understand. So everyone, those were all the books that I read in the month of January 2023. Do let me know in the comment section, what did you read in the month of January? What was your favorite read, your least favorite read? Have you read any of the books that I read this month? If so, do let me know what you thought of them. And if you're still here but you can't think of something to comment, why don't you comment a white heart emoji? Please make sure to give this video a big thumbs up if you enjoyed and subscribe to my channel if you want to see more from me. I post new videos every Wednesday and Sunday. My social media links are down below if you want to follow me on Tumblr, Instagram, or be my friend on Goodreads. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a marvelous rest of your day. Bye, and I'll see you in the next video.